The FICE Act is a functional act, which means that the act creates role players based on function and regulates these role players separately. For example, a person who provides financial advice, that is the function, is known as a representative, that is the role player. A person who manages, oversees an FSP is known as a key individual. And there is different rules for key individuals and representatives. The FICE Act basically only addresses 5 concepts. Firstly, the FICE Act defines the function of each role player. The FICE Act then considers the legal process a person must follow in order to be authorized to perform that function. The FICE Act also stipulates the standards which a person must meet in order to perform that function. Those standards are just known as fit and proper requirements. The FICE Act stipulates the rights and responsibilities of the role player when performing the function of the authorization. And lastly, the FICE Act specifies what enforcement action can be taken should the role player no longer meet the requirements or no longer adhere to the responsibilities. It is utmost important to truly understand the legal function of each role player. In the next slide, I will introduce the most important role players by way of function. The first role player within the FICE Act is the product supplier. The product supplier is the business entity that issues the financial product. Although the product supplier is not regulated under the FICE Act, in terms of issuing financial products, the product supplier still forms part of the distribution chain. The business that distributes financial products are known as financial services providers, or FSPs for short. The function of an FSP is to provide a financial service as a regular feature of business. The product supplier and the FSP can be one business entity or 2 separate business entities. Each FSP must appoint a key individual. The appointment of the key individual must be approved by FSCA. The key individual is the driver of the FSP, manager. The first function of the key individual is to establish and maintain the compliance function. The compliance function is the function that must ensure that the FSP as a business adheres to the stipulations of the FICE Act. Hence, the key individual must establish and maintain the processes within the FSP in order for the FSP to meet the fit and proper requirements and adhere to the responsibilities at all times. In other words, the key individual is the person that will be held accountable by law should the FSP, the business, not adhere to the FICE Act. The second function of the key individual is to manage and oversee the provision of a financial service. This just implies that the key individual is in charge of representatives. Thus, the key individual must ensure that the representatives adhere to the requirements for representatives, and the key individual is also responsible for the processes surrounding the representative. The representative is the person that is authorized by the FSP to provide a financial service on behalf of the FSP. The regulator for the financial services industry is known as the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, or FSCA for short. The FICE division of FSCA administers the FICE Act. Hence, the function of the FICE division is fourfold. Firstly, FSCA must register financial services providers, FSPs, if that business meets the fit and proper requirements to be registered as an authorized FSP. FSCA must supervise authorized FSPs on an ongoing basis to ensure compliance of the FSP with the FICE Act. Lastly, FSCA must take enforcement action against FSPs who do not comply with the FICE Act. The FICE division of FSCA is divided into 4 departments that correlates with the 4 functions: the registration department, the supervision department, the compliance department, and the enforcement department. The commissioner is the driver of FSCA, in that the commissioner is the person appointed to ensure that FSCA operates within their mandate. In order to assist FSCA to supervise FSPs, the FICE Act has introduced the concept of a compliance officer. The legal duties as part of a compliance service is to monitor compliance of the FSP and representatives with the FICE Act and to report back to FSCA on compliance issues by submitting yearly compliance reports. If the compliance officer monitors compliance of the FSP with the FICE Act, it just means in practice that the compliance officer evaluates if the processes established by the key individual ensures compliance with FICE. Therefore, this function can be reworded, and it can be stated that as part of a compliance service, the compliance officer oversees the compliance function. Please ensure that you have your terminology spot on. The key individual establishes and maintains the compliance function, whereas the compliance officer oversees the compliance function. The last role play is the FICE Ombud. The function of the FICE Ombud is to consider FICE complaints that was not internally resolved by the FSP quickly, fairly, and cheaply. Within the regulatory framework of the financial services industry, the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, FSCA, is the regulator. Product suppliers and FSPs are known as regulated entities, as the business of a product supplier is regulated under the sectorial laws and the business of an FSP is regulated under the FICE Act. The regulated officers of an FSP are the key individuals, representatives, and compliance officers. All of these role players are appointed by the FSP and is therefore officers of the FSP. However, these officers are regulated under the FICE Act in terms of regulated activities. The 2 activities that is regulated under the FICE Act is the provision of advice and the provision of intermediary services.